My name is Ray.
Hi, this is Michael.
And welcome to another episode of Ray's Mind Economics Clue Book. Today we're talking about the three different schools of modern economic thought, three most important ones, which are the classical, Keynesian, and Monetarism, and compare that to what our modern school economics generally believes.
Okay.
So first of all, talk about a central theory of stabilizing economies, the quantity theory of money, which is the money supply times the velocity of money, which is how many transactions per se a dollar goes through in a certain period of time, equals our P times Y, our price level times our aggregate output, our real output, which basically is our nominal GDP combined.
Yeah. Because we actually already discussed that in the previous episodes. So
classical basically believe that the economy is always self-correcting and nothing the government can do can change it, basically. And so through the classical theory, a change in money supply only changes price, short run and long run, just period. And so no change in output. So a change in money supply has no real effect in the economy. Keynesians and monetarists believe differently. They believe that price and output will change if money supply changes. However, they disagree on how strong this change in output is. Because Keynesians, as we will discuss later, Keynesians believe that a change in money supply is very weak on its real impact on output. However, monetarists believe that change in money supply has a very strong effect on the change in real output, not just change in price.
Okay.
And so basically, Keynesians believe that through interest rates, the output can change through a change in money supply, and basically an economy can be affected in the short run and through a change in money supply. Monetarists and classical economics believe that many variables have a play in this, aside from interest rates, for instance, consumer spending, etc. However, classical economics believe that this will have no effect on output, real output, but monetarists believe they have a strong effect on output.
Yeah, I think it's pretty important to notice that on the classical model, as we already discussed, actually they believe the V, the velocity, and the Y, the real GDP, they are actually both fixed. Okay, so which means when you change the money supply, it's going to have a what? Proportional change in the pricing level. Okay, so it's a very direct link.
Keynesians believe that money supply is only directly linked to price, basically.
The Keynesian basically says, hey, look, so they basically says the change both P and Y, but the money supply change effect is pretty weak, and the main channel is by interest rate only. So basically means if Federal Reserve they want to reduce, they go ahead, reduce the interest rate, then the AD curve is going to shift to the right because the aggregate demand is going to increase, but to a very limited scope. Which means so they still think V and Y they are both variables.
So basically, Keynesian believes that V and Y are both variables. They do believe that money supply changes can be made immediately and they have an immediate effect almost. However, monetarists, contrary to what you might think, believe that V and Y are stable in the short run. In the long run, we can see they believe that in the long run we can help the government or the Fed perhaps can help stimulate long run economic growth by having a stable increase in the money supply in the long run. So as a result, the monetarist, as we'll discuss later in this video, is against discretionary monetary policy. They believe that it has little positive effect in the long run.
Basically, the monetarist is basically just an autopilot.
Autopilot.
So when if you want to have a stable, the GDP increase, nominal GDP increase, then it's pretty easy to do it because just increase 3% of the money supply each year. That's basically the core idea. And they also think the money supply gonna affect the P and Y through multiple channels, not just the interest rate. For example, you can change the reserve ratio, right?
So the monetarist believes in a constant, stable, long-run, gradual growth in money supply to procure gradual, long-run growth and GDP and output.
So it's pretty obvious that we see the development of those different the classical is before the Great Depression. Keynesian is during the
we see the monetarists come up more popularized during the 60s, 70s, and especially 80s, perhaps during Reagan administration.
Because we see the unemployment and the inflation both actually spikes. And so basically,
we look at how the classical economists, the Keynesian economists, and the monetarists will answer these questions, and then we look at the modern consensus. So when it comes to whether or not expansionary monetary policies help toward fighting a recession, the classical economists, as we can probably guess, believes no. They believe that no expansionary monetary fiscal policy or any basic toward government policy intervention in the economy is effective. They believe in the short run and the long run, prices will immediately change to counter any effect.
So the money supply change,
And so they believe prices are sticky. Prices are never sticky, basically. Wages are never sticky. And so Keynesians believe that monetary policy is effective, but not very effective, and they argue that it then is not worth the resources that it must go through. And monetarists believe that it is effective. And the modern consensus is that it is effective, except in special circumstances, perhaps such as a liquidity trap, as described by John Maynard Keynes, when our interest rate is already so close to zero that you basically cannot lower it anymore.
For example, in Japan.
Yes. Although it is interesting to point out that some countries, such as Switzerland, put interest rates at a negative rate.
Even negative, but actually it's still... well, it is effective, but to a limited scope.
Yes.
Still.
So as Keynes first really pointed out in a major way, during a liquidity trap, this situation, monetary policy is probably not the optimal strategy to go through. Yes. And so expansionary fiscal policy, the classical economics obviously believes is useless. Keynesian economists, this is the foundation of Keynesian economists. So they believe in it strongly. Monetarists do not believe in it at all. They believe that it will be basically countered or ineffective eventually. The modern consensus is that fiscal policy expansionary is effective and is usually one of the most used tools to fight recessions. And so whether or not monetary and or fiscal policy can reduce unemployment in the long run, the modern consensus, the monetarist consensus, and the classical consensus is no. Only the Keynesian believes that it can. However, in the long run, basically through non-sticky wages and things like that, we can see that unemployment, and through the Phillips curve and the Nehru, we can see that the unemployment is unchangeable in the long run through monetary or fiscal policy.
Because we already learned the natural rate of unemployment is a long equilibrium.
Yes, it's unchangeable.
It's unchangeable by just fiscal or monetary.
You must have an external factor,
like for example, technology upgrade, for instance.
So should fiscal policy be used in a discretionary way? Only the Keynesian economists believe so. The modern consensus also no, except in special circumstances such as recessions, perhaps, or things like that. However, it usually is kept away from discretionary use, especially since it can easily be abused by the government for its own interests. Although that's a separate topic. And so, should monetary policy be used in a discretionary way? Once again, only the Keynesian economists have a consensus. Yes, the modern consensus is still in dispute. There's obviously much debate over whether the Fed should have a certain inflation target, whether the Fed should be able to use their monetary policy discretionary, or whether they should be in autopilot mode, like the classical monetarists would believe in. And so, monetarists, of course, they believe we should have autopilot monetary policy, and like other countries, we should have an inflationary target. But currently, it's not concrete in the United States.
Not just Actually, it really depends on the central bank. Different central bank may have different beliefs, and based on their own nation's economic situation, they might adopt different strategies. But from this, we can see actually this is a timeline from in the early 1920s, 1930s. The classical macroeconomics basically is a mainstream. Okay, so basically says, hey, the government basically shouldn't do anything. And the central bank should not do anything either. And the Keynesian actually became very popular in the 1930s and 1940s because of the Great Depression, not just in the United States. And the monetarism actually became very popular in the 1970s and 1980s because of the oil embargo, and people realized that actually short-run Phillips curve is not really effective. There is no trade-off in the inflation and unemployment in the 1970s because both spiked. So then the monetarism became popular. And actually it's just the monetary policy itself is not enough because apparently some supply side structural change is still needed, right? For example, deregulation, tax cut, etc. But again, in the modern consensus, because when the time goes by, people find all those models have different problems.
Yeah.
Okay, for example, monetarism basically increase the debt substantially because long term becomes unsustainable.
Yeah.
Okay, and Keynesian, of course, is in the 1970s, Keynesian policies will not be effective at all because both both have problems, right? Inflation and unemployment. So the modern consensus is really based on you have to look at case by case.
Yes.
And then sometimes you have to adopt a mix of those strategies.
Yeah.
So there is no just a unique solution under some complex situations.
Yes. So, end of the day, Canadians prefer discretionary fiscal policies to all other policies to stimulate the economy. The monetary policy, they believe, is not worth it or should be only a side note in a general policy towards stimulating the economy. And through, they believe that monetary policy only works through interest rate policies only. They don't look at perhaps reserve ratios or things like that. And so monetarists believe in more autopilot, stable, long-term monetary policy to maintain, to theoretically maintain long-run economic growth, which at a time seemed, for instance, in 1980, seemed very reasonable. However, through things like, such, for instance, unstable monetary velocity nowadays, this is not always so simply put to fix the economy. And so they believe that monetary policy works through multiple channels outside of interest rates, just like we mentioned, reserve ratios, to help stabilize and stimulate an economy.
Yeah. So we just summarize those different models and different thinkings. I think they are both great thinkings in the different time periods, and apparently modern consensus is still developing.
Yeah.
Right. So the economists will develop maybe other models in the future. So we'll see you next time. See you guys. Bye bye.